In September of 2019, I found myself crying in my car after a doctor's appointment. I had just been diagnosed with PCOS and endometriosis, but that's not necessarily why I was crying. I kind of figured I had endometriosis. The PCOS was a surprise. However, I had just been dismissed by my doctor and I literally felt lost and did not know what to do. Before we start with my journey with PCOS and endometriosis, let's back up a little bit. I had a feeling that I had endometriosis since I was a young girl because I started my period very young. I was the first in my elementary school class to start my period, which is a sign that you have hormonal symptoms or will have hormonal imbalances in the future. So I was the first in my class who started my period. I was so embarrassed. I didn't even know what to do with it. We had barely just gone through the period talk in elementary school when I started my period. So I started my period. And then came middle school and high school where my face broke out like crazy. I had heavy periods, painful cramps. My low back was always hurting and in pain. And I just felt like this is what happens when you're a girl. And oftentimes I was told by people to just work out more. And I always found that to be a little bit strange because I was working out as a youth athlete pretty much every single day of the week. I was at practice, or I was in a game, or I was outside playing basketball, or I was running. I was always active and always doing something. And it didn't matter how active I was, my periods were terrible. So, um, then in college, I don't really remember too much about college and how my period was. I think it was very similar to how it was in high school. Again, I just thought it was what it was. Like you just have bad periods and that's just part of being a girl and it just kind of sucks. And so bring in my 20s and I was working at the corporate gym. My period symptoms seemed to be getting worse and worse. So heavier bleeding, more clotting, worse acne. It just seemed like nothing was like helpful. And I was getting so nauseous because of the pain. I would cancel plans because it was so heavy. I was tethered to my heating pad every single month. And again, I just felt like this is probably just me. This is how it is as a woman. And there was one moment that kind of changed my thinking around my period and this not being super normal. I was sitting at the desk at the gym and I was doing some client work, and one of my friends was next to me and she was talking about how she would not know her period was going to start if she didn't track it. She had no symptoms, no mood swings, no cramps, nothing. She would not know unless she tracked it. And I was like, that blows my mind because it felt like I would just know no matter what, even if I didn't want to know that my period was coming because I was constantly having the mood swings, having bloating, having the pain, having the sleepless nights. All of those like symptoms, when we think of our period, I was having them. And so she said that, and I was like, that's crazy. I just never thought of it that way. And so in 2019, we had a trip to Europe and I enjoyed myself. I had plenty of gluten and dairy, which previously I had been trying to avoid. And we had drinks, etc. We came back. We had a wedding pretty much right away, which I enjoyed, but I just felt super like inflamed. Everything in my body just hurt. I was bloated 24/7. Bloating was already an issue. I'll dive into that in another video. Bloating was already an issue for me for a very long time. But now it was just like the second I woke up, bloating, all day long, bloating. Nothing was helping the bloating. No stomach medicines, no, like nothing was helping. And I just felt like really bad and gross. And I remember that period was one of the worst periods of my life where I was in bed in the middle of the night, and I actually got out of bed because I felt like my uterus was just going to explode. And I didn't want to wake up my husband who had to work the next day. So I went to the couch, and it didn't matter if I was like laying on my back, on my side, on my stomach, in the fetal position. I just could not get comfortable. I was in so much pain. Even the heating pad wasn't helping. I just was like sweating and I felt absolutely terrible. I actually felt like I was going to throw up because the pain was so bad. And so that was my sign, as well as my friend saying that she literally did not have symptoms like this. That was my sign to make an appointment with my doctor. I'd been going to this doctor for years, so I did trust her. And I made the appointment, and I was very lucky to get diagnosed very quickly for endometriosis and PCOS. Most women, it takes years and years and years. Like I'm talking like decades, or not decade, like a decade to get diagnosed. But for me, I got diagnosed pretty quickly. And I met with my doctor after the diagnosis, and I wanted to know what my options were moving forward. And so she sat me down. We sat in this small little room. It was very cold. I remember it specifically. Like there was like nothing on the wall. It was cramped. I was nervous. So we sit down, and she was like, okay, so you have PCOS and endometriosis, and we are going to put you on birth control. And I was like, stop right there. I cannot be on birth control because I have a history of blood clots, exhibit A. And I don't want to go on birth control. I don't want to, potentially have another issue with blood clots. Absolutely not. Are there other options for me? And she was like, okay, if we don't want to do birth control, here is another option. We can do this pill that is a sex drive pill. And maybe if you have more sex, you will actually feel better. And I was like, that is not the problem. And the problem is that everything hurts down there. And she was like, okay. Um, so I don't know what to tell you. And I was like, okay, so what about, and at this time I didn't realize that hysterectomies actually do not help with endometriosis and PCOS. So I asked her, what about a hysterectomy? And she was like, absolutely not. You are too young. You might want to have children. And no. And I was like, I do not want to have children. I am good. I have a stepson. He's great, but I don't want a child of my own. I've never wanted a child of my own. And she was like, that's nice. You might change your mind. And anyways, we would need your husband to sign off on a hysterectomy. And so I was just frustrated and I was like, okay, so what other options do I have? And she hands me that sex drive pamphlet and was like, if you don't want to take this, then I can't do anything for you. Your pain must not be that bad. And so there's nothing I can do for you. And she was like, take this, think about it. Let me know. I'll call you in a couple of days. And so I took the pamphlet and I was just like in shock. Like this doctor who I've been going to for years, who knows my pain, who actually did know my history with having a blood clot and then still recommended birth control. And I just felt like so like pushed off, like, oh, your pain must not be that bad if you're not going to get on this prescription. But I also knew that there had to be more, there had to be something else. And so I took the pamphlet and I walked to my car and I just remember like feeling like I was walking on air. Like this just can't be real. Like this isn't real life. This isn't happening to me. And I sat in my car and I just started ugly crying. I was so frustrated. I felt so lost. I'm in the freaking health and fitness industry, so why don't I feel like I know what to do? I'm very in tune with my body. So what in the world is like happening here? And I let myself have a pity party for about like 5, 10 minutes in my car, just like ugly crying, snot everywhere. And then finally I was like, you know what? I work in the health and fitness industry. I can figure this out. I work with a lot of amazing professionals, and I'm going to figure this out